a stunned crowd, a deciding tiebreak, and one of the greatest players in tennis history staring across the net at a young opponent who simply refused to blink. Because on a tense night in the California desert, Jack Draper didn't just beat Novak Djokovic, he survived him. And what happened after the match might actually be the most important part of the story, because Djokovic's message to Draper sent a signal to the entire tennis world, a signal that a new generation might be closer than we think. But before we get to that moment, we need to talk about how this match turned into one of the most dramatic battles of the 2026 Indian Wells tournament. And it started exactly how you would expect when Novak Djokovic walks onto a tennis court. Control, precision, and that unmistakable aura that has broken the confidence of so many opponents over the last 2 decades. At 38 years old, Djokovic arrived at Indian Wells with something to prove. He hadn't lifted the trophy here since 2016. For a player who has dominated almost every corner of the tennis world, that gap stood out. This tournament has always meant something special. The desert crowd, the slow courts that reward patience, and the legacy. Because if Djokovic had won the title this year, it would have been his 6th Indian Wells crown, tying even deeper into the tournament's history. Instead, standing across from him in the 4th round was a player who represents the future. Jack Draper. The British left-hander has been talked about as a dangerous talent for years, but injuries have constantly slowed his rise. Every time momentum started building, something would interrupt it. A setback, a withdrawal, another restart. So when Draper walked onto the court against Djokovic, he wasn't just facing a legend, he was facing the weight of expectations that had followed him since the start of his career. And early in the match, it looked like Djokovic might remind everyone why he's still one of the toughest challenges in tennis. The first set followed a familiar pattern. Djokovic absorbing pressure, Djokovic reading patterns, Djokovic slowly squeezing the life out of rallies. There's something about the way he plays that feels almost surgical. Every ball calculated, every defensive slide somehow turning into offense, and in the biggest moments of the opening set, Djokovic did what he's done hundreds of times before. He took control. He claimed the first set 6-4 at that point. A lot of tennis fans watching probably had the same thought. Here we go again. Because Djokovic in control of a match is rarely a good sign for the opponent. But Jack Draper had other plans. And what happened next is why this match is suddenly being talked about all over the tennis world. Instead of fading away, Draper started swinging more freely. The forehand started landing deeper, the serve became heavier, and the rallies became physical battles rather than controlled exchanges. One thing about Draper's game is that when he's confident, he plays with real aggression, left-handed angles, explosive power, and a willingness to take risks. Suddenly, Djokovic wasn't dictating every point anymore, he was reacting. And that's a dangerous shift against a player like Draper, who thrives when momentum builds. The second set slowly started tilting toward the British star. The crowd sensed it too. Indian Wells fans love a dramatic fight, and Draper was giving them one. Game by game the pressure increased. Djokovic still fought like only Djokovic can. Every point felt like a mini-battle, but Draper stayed calm. And when the moment came late in the set, he took it. The second set went to Draper, 6-4. Just like that, the match was even. Now, the real tension began, because deciding sets against Novak Djokovic are famous in tennis. Some players panic, some players freeze, and many simply collapse under the pressure. The third set became exactly the kind of war fans hoped for. Neither player giving an inch-long rallies, brutal baseline exchanges, and a crowd that could feel something special building. Djokovic's experience kept him steady. He defended breakpoints. He extended rallies. He forced Draper to prove again and again that he deserved the moment. But Draper kept answering. Serve after serve, shot after shot. The belief was growing. And eventually everything came down to the ultimate test in tennis. A final set tiebreak. That's when nerves usually show. That's when legends usually take over. But this time something different happened. Draper stayed fearless. He attacked the big points. He trusted his power. And when the final ball landed, the scoreboard told the story. 4-3. 6-6-4-7-6. Jack Draper had just defeated Novak Djokovic in one of the most intense matches of the tournament. The crowd erupted, because beating Djokovic anywhere is huge, but beating him in a deciding set tiebreak at a Masters 1000 event? That's the kind of win that can change a career. And remember something important here. Draper is not just any player in Indian Wells, he is the defending champion. Last year, he captured the biggest title of his career right here in tennis paradise. That victory announced him as a serious threat on the ATP Tour. But repeating success is one of the hardest things in sports. Defending champions often carry extra pressure. Everyone studies your game. Everyone wants to beat you. And this year the challenge came early in the form of Novak Djokovic, which makes this win even more impressive. Because Draper didn't just protect his title defense, he did it against one of the greatest competitors the sport has ever seen. But after the match, the story took an even more interesting turn. Because Novak Djokovic had something to say. And if you followed Djokovic's career, you know that his post-match reactions can sometimes reveal a lot about what he's thinking. This time his message was short, respectful, and incredibly telling. On Instagram, Djokovic wrote a simple line that immediately caught attention across the tennis world. A tough night in the desert. Respect to Jack Draper. You deserve it. Great to see you back on court fighting fit. Keep it going. For some players, that might sound like a routine sportsmanship message, but coming from Djokovic, those words matter, because he has faced nearly every generation of tennis players, from legends to rising stars, and when he publicly acknowledges someone like that, people notice. Djokovic also thanked the Indian Wells crowd for their energy and support during the week, ending his message with a reminder of how special the tournament is. No place like tennis paradise. But if you listen to his press conference afterward, you could hear something deeper behind the respect. Djokovic admitted that the loss left a bitter feeling, which is completely understandable. No competitor enjoys losing a match that close, especially when it comes down to a final tiebreak. Djokovic explained that despite the disappointment, he was proud of the way he fought. And that might actually be one of the most revealing parts of the entire night. Because even at 38 years old, Djokovic is still measuring himself against the highest possible standard, not just winning, but fighting, competing, refusing to give up. That mentality is exactly why he has collected 24 Grand Slam titles and built one of the most dominant careers tennis has ever seen. But matches like this raise an interesting question. Is the next wave of players finally ready to challenge the legends consistently? Because Jack Draper is not alone. The ATP Tour is slowly filling, with young players who believe they can beat anyone. And moments like this only strengthen that belief. Now, before anyone jumps to dramatic conclusions, it's important to stay realistic. One loss does not suddenly end Novak Djokovic's era. If we've learned anything from the past 20 years, it's that counting Djokovic out is usually a mistake. He has come back stronger after setbacks many times, but what this match shows is something equally important. The margin between generations is getting smaller. And that's exactly what makes tennis so exciting right now, because you never quite know when a new rivalry might begin. Speaking of rivalries, there's an interesting detail about this matchup. Djokovic and Draper had only played once before. That meeting came back in 2021 at Wimbledon. And at the time, Djokovic won the match in 4 sets. Back then, Draper was still an emerging talent. Now, 5 years later, he has grown into a serious contender on the biggest stages, which makes fans wonder, could this become a matchup we see more often in the future? Because stylistically it's fascinating. Djokovic with his legendary defense and precision, Draper with his power and left-handed aggression. Those kinds of contrasts often produce the best matches, and based on what we just witnessed in Indian Wells, there's definitely potential for more drama ahead. But the tennis calendar doesn't stop. For Djokovic, the next chapter arrives quickly. His next expected tournament is the Miami Open, second half of the famous Sunshine Double, and historically, Miami has been a great place for Djokovic. He has won the tournament 6 times, a record he shares with the legendary Andre Agassi. Last year he even reached the final. So there's every reason to believe he will arrive motivated, hungry, and determined to bounce back. Great champions rarely stay quiet for long. As for Jack Draper, this victory adds another massive highlight to his growing resume, beating Djokovic at a Masters 1000 event. Message. But the real challenge is consistency. Can he keep pushing deeper into tournaments? Can he stay healthy long enough to build momentum? Those are the questions that will define the next stage of his career. Because talent has never been the issue, availability has. If Draper remains physically strong, his game has all the tools to trouble the best players in the world. And performances like this show exactly why tennis fans are paying attention. One thing that made this match especially compelling was the emotional balance between the two players. Djokovic showing respect, Draper showing belief. That combination represents the transition happening in tennis right now. The legends are still competing at an incredible level. But the challengers are getting closer, closer every season, closer every tournament, and occasionally, on a dramatic night in the desert, close enough to win. So what does this result actually mean moving forward? Well, it might simply be remembered as a great match in a long season, or it might become one of those moments we look back on later and say, that's when everything started to shift. The truth is, tennis history is full of matches like that. Matches where the scoreline doesn't just end a night, it begins a story. And that's exactly why this sport is so addictive to watch, because every match could be the beginning of something bigger. Now, we want to hear from you. Was this just a great upset? Or are we watching the rise of a new contender who can challenge the biggest names in tennis? Let us know what you think, because the conversation around Jack Draper and Novak Djokovic is just getting started. And if the rest of the 2026 season delivers more matches like this one, tennis fans are in for an incredible ride. This is RedDust Report, where the biggest stories in tennis come to life.